One of the indications that we may be having some impact is that the lies told by our opponents are going up. Here's one that I found on YouTube, for example. Let's see if it'll go again.
That 4,000 Jews were tipped off by Israeli agents not to go to work in the World Trade Center on 9/11, which is a bit of a joke because the evidence is so strong.
Dawkins claims Jews were tipped off not to go to work in the World Trade Center on 9/11. This next one is probably a joke, but I'm not sure.
My question really is this: why the anger? What is it that really makes you cross about the way religious people think or behave?
Because perhaps it's because science is interesting. If you don't agree, you can fuck off. Fuck off.
Or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
Note that that was a woman asking the question, and the idea what's going on now is I'm supposed to be stuck for an answer and pausing for God knows how long, unable to answer.
Can you just stop while I think? There's a popular misunderstanding of evolution which says...
Now I'm answering a completely different question, which has nothing to do with the original one, suggesting that I was evading the question.
So somehow we ought to be able to look around the world today and look...
Here's another version.
Professor Dawkins, can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
No, now it's exactly the same footage of me being stumped for an answer, but with a different questioner.
Professor Dawkins, can you give an example a mutation or a evolutionary process that can be shown to increase the amount of information in the genome?
An example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
Can you just stop there? There's a popular misunderstanding of evolution which says that fish turned into reptiles and reptiles turned into mammals, and so somehow we ought to be able to look around the world today and look at our ancestors. We ought to be able to see the intermediates between fish and reptiles and between reptiles and mammals. We ought to be able to see fish kind of on the way to becoming reptiles. But of course that's not the way it is at all. Fish are modern animals. They're just as modern as we are. They're descended from ancestors, which we're descended from. Way back 300 million years ago, there would have been an ancestor which was the ancestor of modern fish and the ancestor of modern humans. And that ancestor, if you could have been there then, you could have seen the first steps towards a fish, say, coming out onto the land and becoming something like an amphibian. But that was a long time ago. You wouldn't expect to see that today. And so quite a lot of the misunderstanding of evolution, I suppose, stems from the fact that people are looking at modern animals and thinking that Darwin has said we're descended from them. Well, we're not. We're not descended from modern fish. We're not descended from modern monkeys. We're not descended from modern apes. They are modern animals just as we are. They are our cousins. They are not our ancestors.
Hello, Professor Dawkins. How are you? I'm Ben Stein. I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
You have written that God is a psychotic delinquent invented by mad, deluded people.
No, I didn't say quite that. I said something rather better than that.
Oh, well, please tell us what you said. Please tell us what you said.
Well, I would have to read it from the book.
No, please.
The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
So that's what you think of God?
Yeah.
How about if people believed in a God of infinite lovingness and kindness and forgiveness and generosity, sort of like the modern day God? Why spoil it for them?
Why
not just let them have their fun and enjoy it?
I mean, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. I write a book, people can read it if they want to. I believe that it is a liberating thing to free yourself from primitive superstition.
So religion is a primitive superstition?
Oh, I think it is, yes.
So you believe it's liberating to tell people that there is no God?
I think a lot of people, when they give up God, feel a great sense of release and freedom.
Why do you think that? I mean, what's your dad? What's your scientist? What's your dad?
I think, well, I've had a lot of letters saying that, and I've...
There are 8 billion people in the world, Dr. Dawkins. How many letters have you had?
No, I haven't done that. That's quite true.
Professor Dawkins seemed so convinced that God doesn't exist that I wondered if he would be willing to put a number on it.
Well, it's hard to put a figure on it, but I mean, I put it as something like, 99% against or something.
Well, how do you know it's 99%?
I don't.
Say not 97%.
No, I did. You asked me to put a figure on it, and I'm not comfortable putting a figure on it. I think I just think it's very unlikely.
What? But you couldn't put a number on it?
No, of course not.
So it could be 49%.
Well, it would be. I mean, I think it's unlikely, and it's quite far from 50%.
How do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I put an argument in the book.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
What was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God. So the Hebrew God, the God of the Old Testament, he doesn't exist in your view?
Certainly. I mean, that would be a very unpleasant prospect.
And the Holy Trinity of the New Testament,
nothing like that.
Do you believe in any of the Hindu gods? Like Vishnu?
How can you ask such a question?
You don't,
how,
right?
How could I? I mean, why would I, given that I don't believe in any others?
You don't believe in the Muslim God?
No. I mean, why do you even need to ask?
Well, I just wanted to be sure. So you don't believe in any God anywhere?
Any God anywhere would be completely incompatible with anything that I've said.
I assume. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure you don't believe in any God anywhere.
No.
What if after you died you ran into God and he said, "What have you been doing, Richard? I mean, what have you been doing? I've been trying to be nice to you. I gave you a multi-million-dollar paycheck over and over again with your book, and look what you did."
Bertrand Russell had that point put to him, and he said something like, "Sir, why did you take such pains to hide yourself?"
But if the intelligent design people are right, God isn't hidden. We may even be able to encounter God through science, if we have the freedom to go there. What could be more intriguing than that?
We live in difficult times with suicide bombers around the world, and time and again one gets the feeling that the people who perpetrate these atrocious acts are absolutely convinced that they're right. And this is not so much a political decision to do something for, well, maybe it's partly a political decision to do something for a political cause that they believe in, I'm sure it is, but also the total conviction that you're right, to the point where you're actually prepared to kill and die for it, is something which even brave soldiers who win the Victoria Cross would hesitate to do. It seems to me that it's faith that gives people the ultimate courage. They're often called cowards. Of course they're not cowards. Courage is the right word. To do these things, and that alarms me very much, because I'm accustomed to verbal argument. I'm accustomed to saying, right, we disagree about something, let's sit down and talk about it. But if the other person is so absolutely convinced he's right that he won't, not only will he not talk about it, he'll actually blow himself up, and me, because he's so convinced. I mean, don't you see that your faith is obviously not in that category, but faith as something that is taught to children, something that they are taught to believe because they believe, isn't that a dangerous thing to teach children?
I think faith is a very dangerous thing. Whether one has faith there is a God, whether one has faith there is not a God. And I would want to say, I think in agreement with you and at the same point diverging from you, that faith can really inspire people to do some dreadful things. But I need to make the point very clearly that faith in God has inspired people to do bad things, as has faith in the belief that getting rid of belief in God would be a good thing for humanity. And I think there's perhaps something more true about human nature here than specifically about religion. I think that one of the things I see in human nature is that a worldview, an ideology, can inspire great acts of generosity, or indeed great acts of charity, and also great acts of violence. I see that in religion. I see the great acts of charity. I'm grateful for those. I see acts of violence which I deplore. But in fairness, having studied atheism during the 20th century, I've seen both things there as well. I think the real question we're confronted with as human beings is simply, if worldviews do inspire people, can we please make them do good things instead of using violence? And maybe I'm just dreaming there, but it seems to me there's something about human nature which makes us go and do bad things in the name of something that might possibly be very good.
Do you think science and faith are incompatible?
No, and I think the history of the whole interaction of science and religion shows that this idea there's perpetual warfare between them is simply historically unjustified. What you can show is at times they are in conflict, and at times they work quite well together. And it seems to me that there's an obligation on all of us to try and make sure that they work together well in the future, as at times they have done in the past.
You've written that atheism is in decline, is in twilight. What do you mean by that? Why do you think that?
When I was researching a book called The Twilight of Atheism, one of the things I noticed is that its appeal is shaped largely by cultural factors. Where belief in God is seen to be a bad thing, atheism begins to flourish. We seem to be entering a phase in Western culture where that core belief seems to be eroded. There's a new interest in postmodern culture about spirituality. And what I see happening, and I don't say this makes it right or anything like that, what I see happening is people beginning to talk instead about spirituality instead of atheism. It's particularly evident amongst younger people, and that made me wonder, amongst many other things, whether atheism actually was beginning to lose the appeal it once had in a more modernist culture.
What about the sort of spiritual atheist, if I could coin that phrase, somebody like Einstein, who was a deeply spiritual man, but who didn't actually believe in a supernatural God?
Well, it's a very interesting debate we could have about whether Einstein actually was an atheist. Certainly, he was not a conventional theist, but I think I would want to raise questions about whether he could be said to be an atheist as a result. But that example aside, I think I can certainly agree that there are many atheists who feel that it is natural or proper for human beings to explore a more spiritual side. I have no difficulty with that. But it seems to me there is an inconsistency there between a fundamentally atheist viewpoint, particularly a Marxist viewpoint, which stresses the material side of life, and this growing interest in the spiritual side of things, which we're seeing all around us.